Hi, welcome to Deal Ready, the podcast for small business owners starting to think about M&A. I'm Phil Fitzgerald, founder of Amplify Consulting Services. At Amplify, we help small business owners plan and prepare for M&A deals. And as you know, here on Deal Ready, we try to help shed some light on M&A topics that are useful to small business owners so they can get better prepared, get a better outcome in the deal process, whether you're a seller or a buyer. And like always, we promise to do it in 15 minutes or less, unless we don't. So today, I'm pleased to welcome Josh Lowenthal, who is an independent lawyer focused on small businesses. And for those that know me, you know Deal Ready, you know one of the things I yell and scream about a lot is that when it's time for M&A, every small business owner needs a good lawyer. Well, even more than that, a good M&A lawyer. And there's no better person than Josh to be on your shortlist. And today we're going to talk about a couple of topics, but one in particular that's near and dear to my heart, and one that small business owners should be thinking about as well. That's IRS Section 1202, or as it's more commonly known, the Qualified Small Business Stock Exception. If you don't know what this is, it could save you literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, in taxes when you sell your business, but only if you plan for it. It is not for everyone, and we're going to talk a little bit about that too. Before we jump in, Josh, welcome to Deal Ready. Thank you for joining me today.
Hey,
Why don't we start with you sharing a little bit more of your background, how you got into working with small businesses and some of the work you do?
yeah, Phil. Well, first and foremost, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. I'm really thrilled to be here and to be talking about this topic. I think a lot of your listeners are, the first time they hear this, they're going to have their mind blown. I tell this to people all the time, and without fail, the moment you hear that, you're like, wow, this is even possible. So with that preview, I'll share a little bit about myself, what I do, and then we'll get into it. So, as you mentioned, right, I'm an M&A and more specifically an M&A and tax lawyer. So, what I do is I help both buyers and sellers on both sides of transactions buy and sell small businesses, as well as provide tax advisory services for SMSO businesses ranging anywhere from a couple $1,000s in revenue all the way up to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue.
What's the sweet spot for you, just in terms of where do you like to spend your time, business size?
So for me, really my ideal size are those smaller companies really doing under about $5 to $10 million in revenue, which, when we break that down by EBITDA or net profits, right, is about anywhere from $750,000 to about $3.5 million in EBITDA.
Right.
Is my sweet spot. Now, my that experience is really colored by my background. So I'm originally born and raised in Michigan. I did go to the University of Michigan for undergrad, where I met my spouse. For
You want to plug that? Go Blue?
Yeah,
Or
go
something like
blue,
that?
go blue. Today specifically, as we're recording this, a lot of us Michigan fans are mourning the departure of our head coach. So Dusty May.
Tough day.
Yeah, it's a tough day to be a Michigan fan. There afterwards, I immediately went through to law school where I did both my JD and I also earned a 1 year tax degree in that same 3 year times period in tax. So an LLM in tax. From there, spent some time in the public accounting firms, working on both middle market and large cap transactions, before eventually moving over to the law firms and starting my own practice. Me and my team support small and medium sized businesses, which for me is truly the backbone of the American economy.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So why don't we jump right in? As I mentioned, we want to talk a little bit about some of these topics that are relevant to small business owners. So, one thing I see very frequently in the world of M&A, where I spend my time, especially for small business owners, is that things take time. So the deal takes time, the preparation, the planning, the stuff you should have done takes time. So in some respects, as you're building your business, as you're operating your business, you kind of always need to have an eye to the future. So from your experience, having done the tax and legal side of things throughout your career, what are some of the areas where you generally try to advise business owners where if you don't look at it today, it's going to be harder later, where you should spend the time, take the effort to do things the right way now? What are some of those things that you see frequently?
Yeah, and it's a great question, right? So I joke about this a lot with other advisors, other colleagues of mine, and I explain it to business owners too, right? That small problems right now are small, and they just become bigger problems as those companies grow, right? And so the more that you can focus in on those problems right now, it just saves you a lot of headaches down the road when, as a business owner, you have an eye towards selling the company. So, a couple of those big things that I see almost without fail, right, is that if you are a producer of any kind, if you provide services, if you create widgets, you're manufacturing, if you are out in the community as a business owner, contracts. You have to have an eye towards contracts, right? Both your service-based contracts, whether you're an interior designer, you're manufacturing widgets, you're an HVAC or you're a plumber, or you're a larger service M&A advisor, for example, right? A lot of people don't think about those contracts. And on the buy side, right, when I come in to buy your company, I want to know who you have agreements with, right? And if you have valid agreements, are there any issues?
Right.
That's number one. Number two is going to be your employees and contractors. So, big issue that we see come up on the buy side, which as a seller, you want to make your business more sellable. And that's going to be making sure that the people who do work for you and your business are A, have agreements, again, right? And B, they are classified appropriately.
Yeah.
Because a huge issue that the IRS will pick up on and is employee misclassification problems.
And you're talking 1099 versus W-2 type stuff?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. A lot of business owners tend to like having people classified as 1099s because then they don't have to pay payroll tax, which is absolutely fair. And if a person working for you qualifies as a contractor, it makes sense to 1099 them. But if that person starts to look more like an employee, you've given them a cell phone, you've given them a computer, you were the only person they work for, then chances are more likely than not, that person is probably an employee. And now you have an unpaid payroll tax liability that's lingering in the background there.
Yeah. And let me guess, this matters because the IRS is ultimately going to be the one that determines this, and the buyer is going to see you in this dispute potentially, and it gives them heartburn or concern that the deal can't even close without contingent liability.
Yes, exactly. And from a buy side, if a buyer recognizes that, hey, you have a bunch of these employees that are a bunch of these workers, right, that are misclassified and should be employees, a buyer might try to come back and renegotiate the deal price, which means that's less money in your pocket as the business owner selling at the end of the day.
You're singing my song. This is my favorite thing to advise people about your money. When you work on your deal, you want to make sure you limit the things that the buyer can push down on and make it so that you get less out of the deal. And obviously, again, these things take time. If you're able to address them proactively before you're having a conversation with the buyer, you're more likely to be able to solve it.
Yes, exactly. And if you think about it, right, even just a year in advance, and I always tell people, look, ideally, 3 to 5 years before you get ready to sell, you should be thinking about it. But say your timeline's a little bit more condensed. You're 12 months out, 16 months or 18 months out. Even then, you can start to have these conversations with the lawyers, with your workers, and get those agreements tied out, get those open exposures tied out, so that when you actually get to the deal, now you're giving your buyer a clean data room, and the buyer looks at that and says, okay, we're not going to renegotiate on price now, because this company we know is going to run with or without you as the owner.
Right. Yeah, it's a common topic. I yell about this a lot too. The notion of being open and honest and transparent with what your business is and what it does and how it works. The more you do that, the less of the obvious questions you're going to have to deal with, and you can focus on the interesting ones.
Exactly.
Speaking of interesting questions, so I mentioned at the beginning, let's jump in on the question of qualified small business stock, or Section 1202. Can you talk a little bit about what it is and why it's important, who should care, and what qualifies folks?
Yeah. So QSBS is a topic that I love talking about here. And as you've spelled it out, right? QSBS, qualified small business stock, it is actually not a technical definition. It's QSB. right?
Acronym,
Yeah, it's an
yeah.
acronym, right? Is really what it is. But it's found in Internal Revenue Code, section 1202. And what that code provision effectively says is that if you own C Corp stock or stock in a corporation that was originally issued to you as the owner, and you've held that stock for a minimum of 3 years, then you can exclude the greater of either 10 times your basis in the stock or up to $15 million.
Big numbers.
Huge numbers. And that's on a per issue basis, meaning that if you have multiple shareholders, then number starts to stack.
Yeah. So when you say that, you mean if there are 2 or 3 shareholders, they're each getting that 15 million qualification.
Exactly. So each shareholder, say, let's hypothetically say you have a business, the enterprise value for the transaction is $15 million. So each shareholder, in terms of pre-tax dollars, gets $5 million. If they've held that stock, and I'll get into the phase in a little bit here, but if they've held that stock for the correct amount of time, and it's a stock sale, right, where they're selling the stock of the company. Again, I'll talk about requirements here shortly. They each are going to exclude the entirety of the gain on that sale on the personal taxes.
It's amazing. You gotta, like, your point is well taken. There are some things you have to do, and they may not be the natural acts that most small business owners would take. I mean, you hear a lot about the benefit of doing an asset sale as a business owner, and you hear a lot about doing an LLC or an S corp. But elections that may not be natural today, again, to the point of doing things today for the future, there's a real potential benefit if you structure things a certain way, and your objective is to minimize tax.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where a lot of tax advisors out there, or what we call tax strategists, right? You'll scroll on Facebook, you'll see these ads, and they'll say all sorts of stuff, right? And oftentimes their knee-jerk reaction is, oh, you've made money this year, you've made money the past couple of years. Let's go make an S Corp election, right? An S Corporation election. Or let's go do this type of maneuver or that type of maneuver. And oftentimes what they are thinking about is working in the best interest of their client today. Rarely is it that they're looking at the best interest of their client for when that taxpayer actually goes and sells the business. Because here's the thing, at least in my opinion, Phil, is that for most small business owners, their business outside of their house is usually the largest asset that they sit on the entirety of their lives. And so,
I think this is an important nuance. Nobody lives in their house after they die, right? So there's a transferability that we need to keep in mind. There are very few companies that survive the owner to a point where they're multi-generational. It happens in family businesses, it happens in larger corporations, sure. But most of us who are small business owners, when we decide to retire, the business will no longer be something we own.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that is oftentimes, right? You're working in the business, you're working hard, you're counting every dollar. And a lot of times you're not, as small business owners, right? They're not necessarily putting money away in a Roth IRA or a SEP IRA or a solo 401k. Instead, what becomes the retirement nest egg is when they actually go for that exit event.
Right. So it's a future exit event that's creating a future retirement fund. And obviously it's critical for those families and founders that are running these businesses because it does secure their future, which is why it's even more important to set it up right the first way, structure it so that you don't have any surprises at the end. I mean, we all pay taxes, we get that. But minimizing or structuring it in a way where you know what's coming to some degree definitely makes it easier when you're trying to call it a day.
Yeah, exactly. And oftentimes this is the largest amount or the largest transaction and the most amount of money a person will ever transact in during their life.
Right. Okay. Well, Josh, this is great, and I certainly appreciate it. We're going to have to do another conversation because I think we're going to go well past 15
Yeah.
minutes, and at some point, I'd like to keep my word. But I really do appreciate you being here. So let's find the time to talk to more things that are useful to small business owners. So, what I'd like to say as we wrap up, first of all, thank you for being
Yeah,
here.
my pleasure.
And second of all, for the people who are out there listening, the small business owners, their advisors, if you are looking for legal support on your small business, please reach out to Josh. If you need help planning for an M&A deal, please reach out to me at Amplify. But until the next time, Josh, thank you so much for being here. And thanks everyone out there for watching.
Yeah, Phil, thank you so much for having me on. For your listeners as well, you can find me on all major socials. I spend the most amount of my time on X, on LinkedIn.
Yep.
On X, I'm just Joshua Lowenthal. On
I'll make sure we put that up as
yeah,
well.
perfect. And then I also write what I call a mostly weekly newsletter, depending on the week, which you can sign up for at smb.joshualowenthal.com.
Perfect. Awesome. We'll make sure we flash that too. Josh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Good to see you. And go blue. Hopefully next year will be better with a new coach. But I feel your pain. I have friends who are big supporters. I didn't go to a school that has any meaningful sports programs, but I
Yeah,
get
you've saved yourself a lot of heartache, let me tell you.
it. Cheers. Happy first day of summer for everyone watching, and thanks again,
Thanks,
Josh.
Phil.